This is Simon transparently awakening the heart of humanity as we see beyond the lies and open our eyes to realize
this is our time to rise.
Welcome everybody to another Simon Transparently, and as you know, this podcast series is all about the invitation to awaken our heart and connect to our truth, and then be messengers of what is possible in the world. And today I launch a new series within the Simon Transparently podcast, and this one is all about sex, sexuality, the deeper connection to our sexuality, and how through empowering ourselves through our sexuality we can actually be great agents of change in the world. So to kick off this series of Let's Talk About Sex, I welcomed in a teacher of mine around sexuality, which is Mareen Scholl. Am I saying that right, Mareen?
Almost.
Tell me.
Scholl. Mareen Scholl.
I always say these, especially German names, wrong. So welcome. Thank you for joining me. And I'd just like to say that people might be curious, like, what teacher are you? So I recently trained to the first stage, you could say, of Sexological Bodywork. And Mareen was one of the co-teachers of that beautiful intensive training that I embodied. So I learned a lot from that training. And I'm still learning a lot from it. It's still actually integrating within me after a year. And it was the essence of that training that birthed the training that I now share in the world, which is called Go Touch Yourself, which is basically orgasmic yoga, the basis of orgasmic yoga. And I learned that also as part of, just a small part of, the Sexological Bodywork training. So Mareen, I know you're a woman of many facets. So let us maybe drop in, and would you like to give a little sort of essence background of what led you to becoming a sexological bodywork trainer, and then we'll dive in. Yeah, how does that feel?
That sounds wonderful. And that's always like a wonderful question. What drove me to it? So many things. I think for a long time, I wanted to become a teacher. That sounds kind of strange, but there was one day where I actually really thought I would like to be a teacher. And then it happened that after quite some years in academics and in social, cultural work, I actually found the body. And and now I'm trying to bring the body and sexuality and pleasure into society. So the field where I used to work a long time ago, I'm still working in, but I'm just bringing some different topics in it. And the difference of sexuality for me is very, very dear. I think it's one of the most important topics in the world, of course.
Yes, I echo that. Woo!
Yay! And the Sexological Bodywork training for me was the first bodywork training I did for myself, actually. Like, a lot of people start with other branches where they come from bodywork. It was the very first approach towards the body for me. So that was already very intense. But before I used to work and play a lot also with BDSM professionally and privately. And so I already had a lot of contact with sexuality from other people and from myself. Like, I was very curious about what is that, how does it work, what does it look like in myself and other people. And over the time I get just more and more curious, and I wanted to deepen that. And so I found this so-called Sexological Bodywork training. And I just stayed with it over all these years. And that was how I became a teacher.
And at what point did you consider, actually, this is the thing that I'm going to become a teacher in, right? Mm-hmm. How did that pop? Was that was there a moment that popped where you just thought, wow, this is so profound, I need to teach this?
When I started afterwards very quickly to give workshops. Like, the bodywork took a bit longer. Right. Because I felt insecure with it. I felt I could not yet embody that. So it took me quite a while to really start as a professional body worker as well. But the workshops I started very quickly, and they became a huge treasure for me, like in my own process and other people's experiences. And yeah, I found this is something that I really like to do. It was very natural to me. And from beginning on, I was quite fascinated by sexological bodywork in the sense that I felt um, it's a method that is very much without a certain dogma or without a certain worldview behind. Basically, sexological bodywork is for everybody who's interested in deepening their own sexuality, no matter which language they speak, with maybe spiritual background or world belief they come from. You can all bring it into this. And I also liked a lot the combination of the very intense body work and on the other side also the link to our brain and our verbal communication, and about this bringing up into the consciousness and also into the language. Like language in my whole life was a very important part. I used to write a lot, yeah, I just found that not just to experience things in myself, but actually the question, how do I bring it to the opposite person? What does it mean? Which language can I find? What does this also change in different levels of consciousness? What changes when I also bring in the language? What is that? Yeah, and that it's a lot about, like I see that always in our trainings, like many different people do the training with many different backgrounds, and they bring in so much competency already in the beginning very often, that sometimes when I'm reading through the applications, it's a little bit my thing. I very often get kind of, oh my god, they know so much more than me.
Right.
Because I'm so fascinated by what knowledge people bring, what experience people bring. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yes.
And I understood over the years that it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what you bring in the end, in the core, in sexological bodywork, it's a lot about also holding yourself somehow back, because it's the person finding their own truth, finding their own experience without bringing in too much of mine. So I will guide them, but I will not tell them all. You know, I'm not the teacher who knows everything. I'm the teacher who opens the space.
Yes.
And that there is no real truth in it, what we are teaching. It's about bringing people into curiosity and into their own empowerment of playing around with their bodies, with their sexuality, and just being open for whatever comes, and deciding moment to moment for themselves, which way do I want to go? Do I want to go like a very challenging way? Do I want to go a playful way? Do I want to go a not knowing way? And it can change from day to day, and everything is fine. And this is what I really appreciate in it, and I've never found it in that sense anywhere else, actually.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. I see this like it's almost like you're holding a space to give permission for us and those that come into that space to explore themselves, which most people, let's just say without being too general, have never had that permission to explore their sexuality. And with that in mind, as you're speaking, there's something was popping up, was like, what I'd love to hear from you. I don't think I'm pretty certain I've never asked you this, but what's your overall view of sexuality as a whole? Like as we're dealing with it in our society right now. I know, you're based in Europe, I'm based in Europe, but like from your experience of witnessing and meeting so many people of different backgrounds and different gender orientation and so on, like, do you see a thread? Do you see a thread in where we're at as a collective with our sexuality? Does that make sense, what I'm asking you?
You mean if I could speak of a certain level of development, consciousness, whatever in the world, or
Yes, yeah. Like where are we at collectively with our sexuality? You know, is there hope?
That's a huge question. I tend to make answers very complicated, so let me just check in for a moment.
Yes, please.
I'd rather not answer directly on that, actually, because for me, collectively, I think it's very difficult to speak collectively about a world development because it's so diverse, and I see so many different things happening in the world and in people, where I think there are so many beautiful things happening in the world, and like beautiful but also challenging. I mean, a lot of topics are coming up. Whether it's about gender, whether it's about different aspects of identity. And for me, every sexuality is very much related to identity. So
Right.
there are a lot of identity topics around in the world really coming up, very explosive also. Like a lot of harsh arguments are going around with topics that have been like left by the side for a long time. So it seems like it's also bubbling, and there's an importance in it. And at the same time, that's also quite challenging, because the discussion, the talk about that is quite quite charged.
Yeah. Good
Because
use of
it's
words.
there are so many really core topics
Yeah.
that really people touch in their hearts and in their whole soul and in their beings. And at the same time, yeah, there are so many things where you see that some work is done, or many people are working on this topic. And when I see it also from some years ago, even like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it is coming into some kind of, I will not call it mainstream, but like a wider audience, I'd say. Like there's happening a lot of interest from society in these topics. It's more present. There's a lot of more awareness about consent, about sexual education, about somatics just in general, and somatics and sexuality then that's coming now over the years. And that's a huge change. I mean, even in the field of sexuality, when I started, there were so many things. Or when you look at sexological bodywork, when all that started, it came out of a kind of a almost anarchistic background, you know, like a lot of exploring, a little bit like freestyle, and things are getting also much more like known, much more detailed, much more refined in what we know about it and how it's spoken about it. And this is quite new, also in the way how people give workshops, how trainings are done.
Yes.
At the same time, there are so many things in the world where you say this is really heavy stuff. I mean, when you look around, where people are quite still very oppressed in their identities. When you look in different countries, here in Europe, for example, in Poland, there are so many different, so many countries where you can't live your sexuality in a free way or explore it in a free way. Out of many different reasons, there's so much still violence against different identities, and this is a huge topic. To who do we bring to who do we bring all this topic? Like, do people have access to it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's beautiful. No, just stay there, because you've mentioned, of course, well, two things that pop up, maybe just for people listening who are very new to this, but do you want to just describe what somatics means to you, and how that, you know, how you see that becoming more and more in our cultures, especially here in the West? And then there's something else there. I really want us to dive in a little bit around this identity, because I know that this is a huge topic that we can't unpack in this short time, but it'd be lovely to touch on that. Does that feel good?
With somatics, yeah, somatics is for me, work that is based in the body more than in the talk or the brain. And it goes all together. It can come all together, but it's like learning and developing and experiencing uh, um, founded in your body. Where you saw in the Western culture, like for many hundreds of years or decades, a lot of approaches that were very mind-based, or like just said like that the Western human being is a lot like in the history, like developed a lot over the brain and about the ratio. And a lot of meaning into academics and knowledge, like brain knowledge. And somatics is bringing back the body. It's there's also a lot of science around. There's also a lot of knowledge that is really important to understand how that all actually works. And connecting people back to their bodies to find their identity, to find their power and strength in themselves, to find stability and their lives based in themselves, and in not, for example, in other worldviews, not in what people tell them, and so
Concepts,
on.
not in just not caught up in concepts and just theories, but actually coming into the wisdom of the body, right?
Exactly.
And really connecting to the wisdom of the body. And there's a wonderful book that I began reading, and I like to reference for anybody out there, but it's the body holds the score, right? And this beautiful book talking again around the wisdom of the body and the trapped trauma and knowledge that the body holds, and that when we start to come into the body and move the body and touch the body and explore the body, we start to release a lot of energy. It brings up a lot of past emotional wounds. It really, like you said, it enables us to come back to trusting ourselves and not always necessarily needing someone outside of ourselves to give us knowledge or give us wisdom and so on. Because when we use the word sex or sexological, a lot of people, and maybe some listening, sort of link that into, it's just about sex, right? The sexual center. But one of the things that I've learned, and definitely what I've taken away from exploring my body more and through the training, I've realized that if you want, I am one whole sexual being. I like, rather than it being my genitals are in my pants, it's like I often reference myself as a complete whole genital now, right? And so I know when people hear me say this, they're still like crazy, it's like they want to make up some funny jokes about me and so on. But the funny thing is the irony, in fact, is that is the truth, because when I realized that I am this whole pulsating, impulsive, sexually alive, energetically alive being, right? I start to engage with myself in a very different way. So I don't know, what does that bring up for you? I'd love you just to, what comes up for you?
I think that's very much true. Also in sexological bodywork, when you see like from the core methods, there's a lot also about genitals. And I think it's also very important, as there are not many methods around that are working directly with the genitals very consciously. But at the same time, it also teaches to expand your awareness and to expand your pleasure on the whole body, and to get away from the genitals, or to feel it like integrated. Yes. And I always like this kind of picture of in a way, it's nice to work with your sexuality in a way that sometimes you want to put a huge focus on your genitals, because there is so much to explore and to find, and to find the power that lies in them, and also the uniqueness of your own ones. And at the same time, to find a way how to integrate the genitals so much in the body that they might not even be like, there's no difference to another body part. Like, it doesn't matter if you touch, for example, my vulva, or if I touch my nose, because it's just body. And I also like a lot this picture. And for me, it's important also in that level that I usually call myself not a sex coach, but a sexuality coach, because it broadens the understanding a lot more. Because to sexuality, for me, everything else is connected. Everything arises from that. The way how I am connected with myself tells a lot how I'm in contact with other people or with the world out there. How do I behave in it? How do I connect with it? And then in the end, it's not like, for me, it's important to go away of the pictures what a healthy or a good sexuality looks like, or how much sex you should have. Also, when you speak about I'm a sex positive person, what does that mean? For me, it's very important that this doesn't mean that I have a lot of sex,
Right.
or that I always have a lot of sex, or what that sex looks like, or that it's very ecstatic, or that it's very spiritual, or whatever, like whatever kind of judgments you can put on it of how great things can be. For me, also, it's important to look at it's also okay not to feel pleasure. It's okay not wanting sex. It's okay to not experience my orgasms like how I would like. But really allowing everybody to find it for themselves and to offer options. Like, for me, I always have this picture: when you look at your sexuality, nobody has to change anything. There's really no need to change anything in your life. But have a look. If you have the feeling, if your sexuality or your being in your body, in your whole being, if it gives you the feeling of satisfaction and something opening, or that it's useful for you, it feels nourishing, or if there is something that is kind of tightening you, that is limiting you, that is closing you down, or that you would want to have something else rather. And because I also feel that sexuality is a lot based on pressure very often. And one of the first thing for me, which is very important, is just to bring out the pressure. And then from there, everything else can come, whatever it might be. But bring out the pressure, and just
release the
arrive
pressure.
in your body. Exactly, arrive in your body, how it is in the here and now, and let's just do that together. Yes.
Yeah. There's so much there as you're talking. I'm like, I'm just visioning, all the, the uniqueness of every individual, right? That we're all so unique, and it's always felt like there's just these real generic boxes of, sexuality, how we should have sex. Like you said earlier, like, I'm very passionate about sex education, and like, us having these conversations and really bringing in this freedom to talk about our sexuality, to talk about the things we like, the things we maybe dream about or fantasize about or desire, and have a place where we can share our desires, and they're not going to be judged or condemned, and like you said, there's this the pressure keeps us contracted, and then of course in that place very rarely we feel safe enough or brave enough to actually express what's going on. And it is so much popping up for me. But in the bodywork sessions that I've done for the training, it was so interesting that people would come thinking that they're going to have their genitals touched, because of course that's welcomed in our teachings, right? In our training. And then 90% of the time, it's not even being able or even ready to even go near the sexual center. I like to call it more the sexual center. But for example, we're working with in the layers of maybe some scar tissue or some wounding that's happened, or just even the idea of what would it be like to now have permission to be touched the way I would like to be touched. Like that can just bring up a whole can of worms around even being in the position to go, oh, what do I actually want? What are my needs? What would I like to explore? Yeah, just a vast scope of exploration of what touch, intimacy, self-pleasure, and sexuality mean. And maybe that leads you in, Mareen, to identity and sort of, I sense in the world right now, it feels like an identity crisis on all levels, not just, and I say crises, meaning that sense of wanting to be free, wanting to have our uniqueness, while at the same time having to deal with these constant labels and boxes that try to categorize us into who we are as sexual beings. There's quite a lot there, but you know, whatever comes up for you.
Yeah, I mean, also because before you were speaking about this collective question, and I really found for myself that like I could talk, and sometimes from teachers this is quite expected, I could talk about huge ideas, you know, about how the human creature can develop into their consciousness and into their power and, you know, empowerment and everything. But over the years, I've been working on so many different levels with people and also with myself. But I found with my work over the years that for me, it's so important to also listen basically to everybody, because this is also where I'm also coming from. And this is also society. So society is everybody out there. And I also like a lot to work with people who don't have so much access. And yeah, so at the moment, at least, I'm coming away for speaking about the huge collectiveness, and coming more really in my experience in the work with also other people, with the individual, and also like with the, how to say it, with the all day life look of sexuality, you know, and how can people actually integrate it in their lives. That sometimes tiny things, it's not always the big experiences from the workshops or from the trainings that are very intense. It's really like the very subtle things in the life of the people, where it might not change their whole life, but it might bring them something where it changes something. And this is what I'm also very much interested right in that moment of time.
So when I think about sexuality, when I think about the, let's say, the dysfunction of sexuality, when I feel into my own dysfunction, and then when I witness or observe what's happening in the world with there's so much sexual abuse, there's, you know, there's so much just really that really, I guess on some level what I witness, and this is of course just my perspective, but sexual ignorance, where there's, you know, a lot of times people feel very lost in their sexuality. They don't really know how to express themselves. They don't know how to communicate. And then we see a lot of distorted, often maybe in the beginning, like not wanting it to be insincere, or not wanting it to be dysfunctional, or not wanting it to be abusive even. You know, I don't think that everybody's just out there wanting to create abusive sexual experiences, but through that lack of awareness, through that inability to express what they really need or what they're feeling, I noticed that a lot of misunderstanding creates a lot of futile conflicts. That's how I perceive it. I'm noticing that the narrative, even just 20, 30, 40 years ago, was very, very distorted. You know, there was like so much suppression. So it's just so, you know, you can't even talk about sex in certain places. As you mentioned, broader narrative of sexuality is one of oppression. And then how historically, for a number of different, let's say, collective beliefs, let's say, you could say male dominance over the years, there's been this repressed, I think is the best word I can use. When I say sexual expression, I really reference in life force energy, creativity, the ability to speak our truth, to express ourselves fully. And what I've noticed is that has been, I mean, in man and woman, but the energy of that, which I would call a feminine expression, right? I would just use that terminology, has been really suppressed. So what I'm interested in is enabling individuals to access that often anger, rage, trapped emotion, And then once that starts to get released and people can start to feel their own power again, let's use that word power, they can express themselves in their own uniqueness, and that can invite a whole array and new flowering of expression. And so I'd love you to maybe talk to that, of like, how do you perceive the suppression or repression of the feminine, if you even do, if you even have a view on that?
On one level, I see, on one level, I agree with you. I mean, that's something that you can meanwhile like read everywhere. It's said everywhere. Like, I mean, over the last decades, we can see what feminism brought to society, and very often nowadays you say, yeah, what do you need it for? Because yeah, it's not natural. Like, in our world, at least, the privileges we have as women, they are not natural, and we are still not in the power or in the rights we could be. There is a lot of imbalance in so many things when you look at it in society, whether it's also very practical, like in the how women are getting paid, for example, which sounds not related to sexuality, but of course it is, because when you then look down how the payment of women relates to their role in the families, and how this relates in the way how they either earn for their life or live for a husband or for a kid. If you look at these very heteronormative lifestyles, which have been the normal lifestyles in the last decades, no? And so to open these things, also like payment and these things, have to do with what options do women have in society? What options do they have to decide, how do I want to live my life? How do I want to own my own body? How do I want to how do I want to design my life? And what does that have to do with how we live relationship, how we live family? And in the end, how is that situation in the context of capitalism? I mean, it's you could go like, all these things.
Exactly. I like it. I love it. I love seeing how it all weaves together. But carry on.
And yeah, there is all this knowledge about this about the female bodies that has been partially there in the past, in old cultures, also in science before, and that is popping up now again. And there is a huge huge push, I feel, where it is getting out there, you know, like so many books, so many possibilities for women to experience what is sexuality, what is that my body, like my anatomy, everything. It's just coming up now, and so many things so far also in science and in sexuality have been like looked at from a very male perspective. Like science has been looked at from a male perspective for the needs of men, and not from a women's perspective. And all these problems that we also find there are also there because of this binary picture of male female. I mean, this is where all these problems also come from, that in society there is a very clear picture of what maleness or male, female, man, woman is. And this is something that the LGBTQ community can teach us, that there is so much more, and that actually the pictures of what that is are so much more. So also when you speak about female qualities, me personally, I can work quite well with these pictures of male, female, because I can associate them in qualities. But I also like to refer to it as always asking people, what exactly do you mean by that? Like, what qualities do you actually mean? What is this quality that the female brings in it, to actually go away from the picture that it's actually certain qualities that are only, how to say, that are mostly embodied by women, because it puts already a certain picture on it.
Exactly.
And I think all this misunderstanding and all this war that's sometimes going on between what is sexuality and the gender cliches we have in that, which are also related to rights, or how do we communicate? How do we bring us out in the world? How do we ask for what we want? How do we take what we want, and all that?
Right.
What does sex actually look like very practically? How the fuck do we fuck?
Right.
What does that look like? It is so much based on stereotypes, and they are so deeply embedded.
Right.
And I think that sometimes there is a tendency where we also come into a new kind of stereotype of male, female, but it has a little bit of a spiritual, esoteric painting around it.
Filter.
And I think that doesn't help very much.
Right.
And I think it would help a lot when you then say, okay, what is it? What qualities are actually not on one side? Yes, I'm totally seeing that there is a need to support all the genders that haven't had their role in the world until nowadays, and at the same time also seeing that we all suffer from that. Yeah, to really understand that what capitalism actually brings to us, or the structure of our society brings to us, this is where we all suffer from patriarchy. This is basically not only the women or other genders, it's
exactly. It's everyone.
It's everyone.
Yes.
And to understand how does that relate to each other,
and how does that impact us as individuals?
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
depending on our background. For example, I really, there's something coming up beautifully for this. Thank you for bringing that in, because so I have this thing, right? I didn't really understand that there was even so many genders and different orientations until I started the sexological bodywork training, right? I was just, in my own whatever heteronormative, box that we've just described, and even people, when they meet me, they categorize me as the alpha male, I'm this being, I must be like this, right? It's just how it is, right? It's just, we need to put these boxes on people instantly to position them where they need to be in order so we can sort of actually engage or not engage, right? It's sort of a safety mechanism a lot of the times. Like, okay, that person's like that. I know how to position them so, I can get on with my day-to-day, my day-to-day life, right? It's like,
yeah. And very often you could say a talent for performance.
That's nice. I take that one. And yeah, but so for example, I really play. I'd love to hear what your feeling is on this. And I love how you just describe, okay, there's masculine, feminine, but again, even that in its essence of describing the qualities of that can be very, very different for every single individual. And you can meet an individual that has, feminine qualities, but is also very so-called masculine, depending on who's judging the qualities, right? So that's even, that in itself can't even be clear, right? So we're dealing with that. And then the retreat that we often invite people on is called Naked, right? And in this Naked retreat, the invitation is to really explore and strip away, right? This sort of metaphor is to strip away our identity and our beliefs and our theories and concepts to everything that we have, right? So for example, me, I don't even like to call, why do I want to call myself a man or a woman or more masculine or feminine? Like the minute I do that, I'm still limiting myself in some way. And I don't even, on some level, I don't even really like the word human. What does human mean, right? It's like you start to go down to the basics of so then sexuality, it's hard to put this into full words, but what I'm saying is there's almost like a neutral blankness that comes when as you was talking, I was thinking, yeah, we're just actually these, or I see myself as this this blank canvas that wants to be adaptable in any given moment. And I don't even know who I am in this moment and the next moment. And I'm open to the infinite potentials of who I could be through the curiosity and exploration of the space, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's like, so, the minute that we lock into any of these sort of identities, I still feel that we're on some level limiting ourselves. That's what pops up for me.
Yes. Yeah. It's exactly like the picture of speaking about male, females, very often just limits. Sometimes it can, like, I think it can help to speak about things, start speaking about things, but it's a start, you know. I think from there you should really then dive a little bit deeper than that. And also that for me is a quality that sexological bodywork brings in a lot, because we make the experience that working with the body and giving people the chance on one side to name their genitals in their own way, how they want to speak about them, opens up a whole new universe. And also it's about this trying to tell people, okay, we go into a touch exploration, into a sense exploration, and from there try to get out of the picture you have about yourself and your body and your being, and start really just feeling what is there. And then it becomes so interesting what we can actually start sensing and feeling. It's so much more than the pictures we have. And but to be aware of that also as a body worker who works with genitals, to be aware that even my picture of what I think a penis is or what a vagina is limits my way of touching somebody. I'm coming with all these imprints of my past, what I make around that, what a penis should look like, what it should do, how it should be, how it should get touched, how a person would like to get touched, and to go away from that completely, because we don't, otherwise we will work with our own ideas on that person's body, and that can limit the experience or actually create a very awkward or damaging situation. So really giving this empowerment to the person to sense their own bodies in the present moment can bring such a magic, really.
Right. So yeah. So you're so and from that present moment, are you agreeing that anything is welcome, right? We don't know what's going to arise. We don't know what's going to arise out of that moment, because like you just said, people may have different terminology, they may have different ways to express it, they may have something very unique in that moment that pops up that they hadn't even been aware of, and
exactly.
and that's
And it's so important from there also to actually really listen to what people have to say, and really like what the body has to say, but also what people are actually speaking. Because for me, I'm always asking a question like, what is important for you? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to look at? I leave it to the people. I can mirror what I feel and see in them, or what I hear, but in the end, it's so important for me to let them decide. Because also when you think about sexuality and identity, there are times in people's lives where it is not at all important, or no, let's say it the other way around, where it is very important to speak about, for example, a certain gender, where it is very important to define, how do I embody myself as a woman? How do I embody myself as a man, as a trans man, trans woman, as a non-binary person? How do I define that? What do I associate with it? How does that feel? What words can I use for that? How do I want to express it? You know, and where it's very important to use these names and words and categories for identities, where it's very important. And mostly when you look then again, like for people who have all this history of oppression, also like for women to speak about them as women, but also then again for trans people or for non-binary people also to use other words, and where it's so important to actually also speak about that, because it's in that moment very, like, it's about privileges, like when your identity has not been accepted in your life or in society, it is important to name it. And where you say in other times in life, or maybe when you found like a foundation in yourself, or whatever the reasons are, to go away from definitions, and this can open a complete different space. But this is why I really motivate people to listen to their clients very, very carefully, because it's not important what I find important. And the topic of identity is such a, it's very strong. It's very
Right.
strong.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful what you bring in there. There's a couple of things that are popping. I love this. See, yeah, it's just getting started now. The conversation's just getting started. But what's lovely there is I want to share this just for people listening mostly, because I'm sure you've had many experiences of this. But yeah, I want to mention, just reference actually a friend of mine who identifies as a gay man. And he came into an experience with me, and I was like, oh, well, I'd sort of, let's say you could say, I, on some level, disregarded the term gay but not from a putting it down, but just saying, oh, because I have many gay friends that use the word gay, but I was like, gay didn't really mean much to me in this context. And the way that I spoke was really challenging for him, and really challenged him because it took him 15 years to be able to call himself a gay man in his environment where he grew up, where it's massively religion, and they were not allowed to call themselves gay in any stretch of the imagination. And when we ended up having a sharing on this, and he brought that into my awareness, it was so powerful for me, Mareen, because I was like, wow, I had no understanding how difficult it would be for him to just be able to call himself a gay man, right? Because I haven't personally had that dilemma and that challenge. And he had a lot of not I'm not going to say pain, but just there was a lot of energy, quite, it angered him as well. Not just, I didn't anger him so much, but just the fact that he's had to go through so much struggle, right? And so what you say, I think, pretty much just covered that so beautifully.
Exactly, because I mean, as you're describing it, like you yourself as a cis male, it's very easy to say I'm letting go of all categories now, like gender doesn't matter. And I also know it for myself. I mean, for myself, I feel like I have a lot of like skills where I can, or self-consciousness, or standing in my own world, and this and that, where I can, I also can say I have stigmas on me, but it's a complete different level than other identities have here in our world. So, and on the other side, I totally agree that when you dive into your body, it can open universes nobody knows, and it's just out of all, far beyond all categories now.
Yes.
And I find it just for me, this is a very dear topic in the realm of our training, because since the last years where we implement our own training. So we had the training from the Swiss Institute and the training from the Australian Institute that were our teachers. And so we were building up our own ones. And in Berlin, we also, it's very important to us to have a very inclusive training for many, many different people, sexual orientations, gender identities, and so on. And we really can see over the years where we do that, that it's our second training that we do by ourselves at the moment this year, for example, how difficult this actually is. And on one side, Sexbot is a cool method to actually really go for it. Yeah, and it's so, everybody can learn so much from each other because we bring each other into communication. And this, for me, when you speak about diversity, you fucking have to communicate, otherwise it just doesn't work. Yeah.
And and this is, so I just want to emphasize the importance of this owning our own feelings and thoughts that are coming up, practicing how to articulate that and express that, right? Because that in itself is really difficult. And then creating a space where we can accept diversity but still show up trying to not judge.
Yeah, exactly. And you can go into a complete mindfuck, for example, about inclusive language. And at the same time, it's a very important mindfuck. I'm sometimes getting, oh my God, this is, it fucking drives me crazy. And at the same time, it's about also allowing this challenge. And I just, in the topic of inclusive language, for me, it's just like, it doesn't matter if it's gender identity or other topics of identities. But for me, it just shows in one example, like very strongly, how difficult these processes are, like how it is about language, and at the same time it's about sensing, and it's about privileges, and how do we do that in a kind of a short time, like,
Right.
because these are topics that are around in society, and we
Right.
just have them in a lens in our workshops, and that's
Right.
intense and
Yeah.
so much charged with emotions. um
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I just want to say thank you for just us exploring this and just having a play here, to unpack and just bring some awareness to it. Because I think that even just this conversation, and I'm hoping for people listening, is just even, I'm sure bringing up, sparking lots of different thoughts. And for some, it might go, oh, it just sounds so damn complex and sounds like like you said, a mind fuck. And is it one I even want to deal with? But for me, I'm really interested in this topic immensely, because I want to bring in that sense of, for me, love, underneath it's about love, right? And love is free, and love doesn't segregate, and love doesn't have borders, and love doesn't judge you whether you are this, that, or the other, or you want to do this, that, or the other, right? It's just love loves, and that's all it does. And if people can drop into that at times, there's a much more empathic, compassionate way of engaging with people, and not having to try to uphold any fixed point of belief or fixed point of how it should be, but can actually be, again, openly curious to hear how other people are experiencing their life, their sexuality, and so on. But
exactly.
I'd love you to just, for me, actually, this is really my question to you, and I'd love you to give me some advice as my teacher, would be, when I'm in a workshop, or when I'm addressing people in a talk, or I'm holding that space, and really wanting to be as inclusive, be fully inclusive. Love is inclusive. So that is always my intention and practice. But even the words I use, that I'm conditioned and come in and pop in sometimes. I could be in a flow, and words will come out, and these are conditioned words that I've had, and they can offend people, or people think all of a sudden that because of the terminology I'm using, because it's either heteronormative, or it's like sounding like man and woman, people can be offended in the space because they think maybe I'm not including them, right? And I just wondered, is there a way that you sort of blanketly can communicate that does include, and at the same time, doesn't necessarily offend, right? And of course, I know that I personally can't offend somebody. That's not my intention. But depending on how they interpret the words and what I'm saying, can be really, it can close them, basically. And my practice, just to finish, is just to be very transparent with my experience, to be very transparent with where I'm coming from. And that often brings much more, let's say, clarity. But I'd love you to speak to that, just maybe in closing of this topic.
What you said, I already find very important, like, to be very transparent, because I also have to say for myself, like, I'm not very perfect in that. There are a lot of things I don't know, or where I'm also still not so used to. And I'm learning a lot also from my colleague Nino, and a lot from our students. So I think, like, the quality, the treasure that our spaces can offer is that it can be spaces of dialogue. And this is for me important. And when we make ourselves transparent in who we are, where we come from, what our intention is, then it opens up a space where everybody feels invited to to add something to that, no?
Yeah.
And I mean, me personally, I also like, because I found for myself that there are so many different needs. If we have a very diverse group, there are so many different needs, or ideas about, for example, what inclusive language sounds like, what it is, what it should look like. Yeah? And me personally, I want to insist on that, that in my spaces, that we have a certain intention, for, like, we have an intention for inclusiveness, but I'm always also saying, I also wish for understanding. If people don't always include people in their language, it can happen. And we, as I said, we don't, like, people come also from different backgrounds. We have different realities in our background. And it would be nice if you all would have this one perfect magical language that is perfect for everybody and includes everybody. I haven't found it yet. I haven't found it yet, but I'm still learning.
Yes.
But I also I think it's very important to make it also playful, to bring something in where you speak maybe in the beginning about where people feel they also where you bring in some information so that people come into an awareness to the topic, and at the same time to bring in input where it gets playful when somebody makes a so-called mistake. Yeah, so that it doesn't feel anymore like a mistake, but actually like a space where we can all learn from. It's not like, oh shit, I did something wrong, or maybe then there comes aggression with it, or I know I didn't do anything wrong, and what happens to that, all these dynamics.
Right.
But it feels really like a place where everyone's to learn together, and this means that sometimes we have to take away a little bit something from our privileges, and things can start feeling awkward and strange, or we don't know anymore how to behave, and that belongs to that. And at the same time, that it is also okay to be who you are, and to have your background and to have your reality. And for me, this is very important.
Yeah, because that also, that is also enabling our own uniqueness of what we're bringing to the table and whatever that is, right? And when we come together from that honoring that everybody's been on their own beautiful path of exploration and discovery, and we can just honor that, right? Really show up from that place of honoring that, and I love the words you use, but really learning together through experience, as opposed to closing the door to what somebody else may have to bring, to offer, to contribute.
Yes.
So,
And I like to mention it, for example, in the beginning, that I don't use a specific strategy for inclusive language, but that I actually try to use. Because for me, sometimes different strategies or ideas about inclusive language are, for myself, sometimes very strict again, and that it puts in there a new box where I sometimes feel then always some other people don't feel like addressed, or something again doesn't work anymore. And I usually say I don't like with thinking about language, I don't want to find another box that limits my language. I want to find something that broadens my language. And so what I do is that I say I don't have this one way of speaking. I'm trying to use any kind of words about gender, about how you can call genitals, in the way that is possible. And I will say again and again many different words, so where everybody can feel addressed and sometimes not. If you don't feel addressed, then there will be another sentence where we'll say it in that way. So, but I really want to open it up more than insisting on one certain way.
exactly.
Other people do it different, but that, at least for myself, is for me feels at the moment as the best solution.
Yes. And I feel, listening to you, that is actually the in my opinion the best approach, because we have to feel, as individuals, as facilitators, as showing up in that space as well, we have to just feel that I'm doing the best I can in this space to open it. But I like what you said of, and I think I'm very much like that. That's my intention, is to be open and not fixed to any one, way of communicating, and learning from people that are coming into the space, and
it can become really this play, because on one side, yes, language can be very cruel and violent, but it's also our decision to start playing with language. And I want to make it playful, or like an open space with it, and to say I'm using different words, I'm using different definitions, and just throw all kind of words and definitions just in that you find for yourself, because that can be so much, many people use language in a very different way. And I think for me, So as well as what happens in our bodies, where we share that and learn from each other, we also learn from how do people use language, because we do it in a very different way. I mean,
Yes.
we can also use language in a very poetic way. Sometimes when people don't speak like native language, they use it anyway in a very different way. Also that, you know, like,
Exactly.
why not just throw it all together
Yeah.
and make something out of that, what we can find.
Right, and I've met many people, I'm sure you have too, from different backgrounds, different nationalities, and so on, that also sometimes can't even find words to describe the what they're feeling, and then also depending on what levels of theory or even some spiritual concepts and esoteric concepts, often people can't find certain words, and they need to find it in some other way, or the way other people interpret it. So I love this, as always. I love that we come back to play. You would not believe it, but nearly every podcast that I've recently recorded in this new series comes back to play, right? And it comes back, really, it comes back to the divine play and the divine, the divine curiosity, I would say, of like, we're here together to really play and not take everything so seriously, although honoring each person's space and honoring where they are with their own beliefs. But really, I like this. Of course I do, because I love to play. But I love this idea of not taking things personally, knowing that everybody's where they need to be, showing up from that place, and then being very curiously intrigued to play with whatever's there, right? That's what's coming up for me as a sort of summary of what we've just danced with. So cool. Well, there you go. I mean, we're coming to sort of a close of our I told you an hour would fly by. Did I not say that? He was like an hour? Really, an hour? Like I feel like we're just playing now and getting to some of the juice of our experience. I mean, there's so many different topics I would have loved to speak to you about, especially trauma being one. But maybe we can do another talk on that another time. But based on what we've shared so far, just in closing, what's alive in you? Is there anything you would like to share to people listening around either everything, really, anything really, play, sexuality, gender, whatever's come up for us?
Anything. Oh my God.
Free flow. You have absolute freedom, free reign.
My brain can be so busy when you're asking these kind of questions. I'd rather have a clear question, or I'm not saying a single word.
Clear question then. Okay, what message will you share to someone who's really wanting to explore their sexuality and they're feeling stuck? They have no clue what to do. What would you say to them?
I would say, on one side, just do everything that reconnects you to your body, and where you just come into your senses, back into your senses again, and sensing your body, because from there you can actually feel a little bit better where you might want to go to, what your wishes might be. If you don't feel yourself, you don't feel your wishes. And on the other side, I would just say, ask me, ask other people. There are so many great professionals, communities, web information out there in this world. I mean, so much where people just don't know about, and it's just amazing. And just as you say, like, coming back to play, there is so much possibilities to play, and mostly when you're getting stuck, it's so important to get out of the stuckness, and either through coming into stillness and into calmness, and listen very, very silent and subtle to what your body has to tell. And on the other side, to just go with what you don't know, go with what you never thought of, and just become playful and go in contact with other people. I mean, sexuality for me is learning with other people, and not only with us. I mean, that's one thing with orgasmic yoga, as you know, is one great way to do that. But also bring your sexuality away from your relationship, or go with your relationship into a community, into a different space where sexuality actually becomes, as you said before, collective. Let's learn collectively, because there is really so much richness which brings us out of our patterns, out of our views, out of our imprinted behavior, and just open up and explore.
Mm. There you go. That was beautiful. That's a nice little as you were saying, I heard the word, when we come into our senses, everything becomes sensational. That was my little end. Well, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for showing up as you do. Thank you for all the inspiration that you share to those that you meet, and for your teachings, and for your dedication to this exploration of our sexuality and who we are as divine beings, I would like to say. And I love you. I think you're super cool and quirky, and I love your teachings. And for everybody listening, just like, I hope you could take something today from this beautiful conversation with Mareen. And if you have any questions, feel free to fire them over to us. But wherever you are, just know that you are exactly where you need to be. You don't need to become something more. There's nowhere really to get. And if anything, as Mareen said, if anything, it's a coming back to the body, to this present moment where we can connect truly to who we are. And who we are is enough, right? The uniqueness of who we are is more than enough. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this first part of the Let's Talk About Sex series. Thank you so much, Mareen.
Thank you.
This is our time to rise.